Well, hello, Convention of State supporters. My name is Andrew Woodruff. I will be your host for this episode of COS Live. Rita Peters, unfortunately, is not with me again this week. She's going to be out for the next 2 weeks. We can't wait for her return. But until then, we have an exclusive interview with Dennis Riddell, who is the North Carolina representative and the chief sponsor for the Convention of States resolution. After a recent victory, we're going to get his perspective. And maybe North Carolina will be the first state in 2021 to pass a COS resolution, joining this movement to rein in federal power. But of course, before we get to that exclusive interview, we have our Article 5 trivia giveaway with COS Vice President Mike Ruthenberg. Mike, take it away.
Andrew, thanks for the welcome. It's great to be here at the start of another fantastic show. I'm so excited that you're going to be joining North Carolina Rep. Dennis Riddell. And I've got some great trivia for today because even if you have some ideas about what's going on with Convention of States and Article 5, the answer that I'll produce later in this broadcast to our trivia question will explain a lot of the reasons why there's no good argument against a Convention of States. So there's a little bit of a clue as we go along. And I want to say that I'm super excited right now because we have reopened our store. As I promised last week, we were really close. Well, we were really close, and we were able to finally get a brand new COS store going. You can check it out by going to shopconventionofstates.com. And you can get shirts like this one that I'm wearing right now, Hell No Joe. And you probably understand that through executive order, President Biden is looking to try to stop gun violence by curtailing our Second Amendment rights. And there's really three words that describe my feelings and many, many feelings about that. Obviously printed on this shirt. It's a great COS shirt. It talks a little bit about things that a lot of people are interested in. And we know a lot of people are interested because well over 1,000 of these shirts have gone out in just a couple of days. Of course, we've got our COS logo right here on the shirt. And it would be a great thing for you to wear. And you can go to Shop Convention of States right now and grab one. There's some other designs as well, including this one. This one is a sample. I'm going to give it away. This one we call the True American, right? Doesn't that look like America to you? It's Convention of States. And we're going to give this shirt away to the person that wins our trivia contest today. And it has to do with interstate conventions. And interstate conventions are interesting because they really set the scene for the rules of how a Convention of States might be run. And the question is that an Article 5 convention is kind of called interstate convention. And one thing I'll give away right now is that there have been interstate conventions in our history, both before and after our Constitution. And the question is, how many of these interstate conventions have there been in American history? And this one's going to be multiple choice. So even if you're not really sure, you can answer just by picking one letter out of the alphabet, A through D. A is one interstate convention. B, under 10. C, there's been 27 interstate conventions in American history. Or the last one, D, 38 plus conventions, interstate convention in American history. So my question to you is, which one is it? And I'll be back at the end of the show to tell you the answer. And hopefully you'll win this shirt. And of course, if you don't, go to shopconventionofstates.com and get one right now. Back to you, Andrew.
Well, we are pleased to welcome onto the program State Representative Dennis Riddell, who is the lead sponsor for the Convention of States resolution in North Carolina. In 2018, he received the Jefferson Award, which is awarded by Convention of States on behalf of the grassroots supporters. Representative Riddell, it is a pleasure to have you on the program. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, and I am glad to be anywhere there's COS friends.
Amen to that. Well, we had a big win in House Judiciary 4 the week before last, where you presented our Article 5 resolution. You were in the room with so many supporters from North Carolina who drove all the way to the Capitol to have their voice heard and to stand up for the COS resolution. For our viewers, describe what it was like to be in that room and to gain this victory in the committee.
It's always encouraging when you have a large group of COS supporters in the same room with you when you're speaking on behalf of the resolution. At one point, if you've seen the feed, you know Mark got up and was able to speak for just 1 minute, but what he did do was ask everybody who was in the room in favor of COS to raise their hand, and this just crop of hands went up all around the room. It was beautiful to see, and I'm sure it made an impression on everyone in the room, especially those maybe who had some hesitation about the resolution. But as we progressed through the hearing, it was obvious we had the votes to win in that committee. And so as the committee action proceeded under the guidance of the chairman, we had a successful vote, and now it goes on to the Rules Committee, which honestly will be a little more difficult.
Mm-hmm. And so if you pass in the Rules Committee, what's going to happen after that? What's next in this process as we kind of move through the legislature? How do you feel about the prospects of the resolution passing?
Well, when the resolution was introduced, it was assigned to two committees, the Judiciary 4, which we just passed, the Rules Committee as well. And the Rules Committee will be the final stop. If we get through the Rules Committee successfully, which I believe we will, but it's going to take some energy, we will take it to the House floor. And we had a similar COS resolution that dealt just with term limits, passed successfully with, I think, 62 votes in favor several weeks ago. I'm hoping maybe we can get a similar vote this time around with our more expansive and I think more to the point COS, where term limits, while it might be a good idea on its own, is not insufficient. All you really are doing is shuffling the deck of the membership. You really need the constraints of fiscal accountability, balanced budgets, and reduction in the scope and power of the federal government to accomplish what we need to in our country right now, which is basically walking back from the fiscal cliff we are teetering on.
I love that you bring up the fact that our resolution covers more than just term limits and that it has more teeth. It has the fiscal restraints like you were talking about. So what would your message be to legislators in North Carolina for why this movement, the Convention of States and our Convention of States resolution, is so important for reining in the federal government?
Well, I'd ask them if their federal government has stolen their credit cards and those credit cards of their children and run up an enormous debt. Well, we have an app for that. And the app is Article 5 of our United States Constitution. It's obvious. The federal government is incapable, is unwilling to control itself and to restrain its appetites for deficit spending and accumulation of debt. That change, that discipline necessary in Washington will have to come from outside of DC. It doesn't matter who has been in charge, Republicans or Democrats. The debt keeps going up, now at a staggering rate. If even half of the current administration's proposals are put in place, we will have added enormously to our debt. Now, I'm 64, so the chances of me having to pay off that debt is going to be pretty slim. But for my children, grandchildren, we're putting them in a place of indentured servitude by saddling them with a huge national debt that they will have to pay the increased taxes for or experience the less economic opportunities that will come from that. So, friends, this is the hour for the state legislatures to stand up, be the adults in the room, and force upon the federal government the discipline which it congenitally lacks.
That's, great words trying to get to the legislators on your side to pass the COS resolution. We need them. But I want to switch over to the volunteers. How important are the COS volunteers to this process? And what can you say about the North Carolina team?
I can talk to my colleagues every day, but when they hear from their constituents, when they hear from people they know in their district, that's what makes the impression. Most of my colleagues are here. They understand that they're not representing themselves. I don't represent myself. I represent District 64 and in the North Carolina House. And I have to be cognizant that what I'm doing is in the best interest of the citizens of District 64, not for my own self. So hearing from constituents on this issue or other difficult issues that sometimes come before the legislature, it's imperative that we hear from the grassroots. And I will compliment our grassroots organization here in Convention of States. They have really stepped up their activity this year, and they are to be commended. Everybody that takes the time to make phone calls, send emails, show up, take time off work, take time off their day, show up at a legislative hearing, have to wait outside the room for 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour to be sure to get a seat. God bless them. We could not do this without you.
Mm. And as a state legislator, speaking to the people or the patriots who are watching right now, what are some ways that they can have their voices be heard, and how can they stand up to make an impact in the political process?
Did you say state legislators?
Oh, no, for the people who are watching right now, how can they make a difference, and how can they make their voices heard within the political process?
By all means, contacting your state representatives on this issue. We need to hear from America. We need to hear from the people back in our district. We need to know and convey to legislators that this is a critical time in our nation's history. This is not the time to be sending mixed signals. This is not the time for uncertainty. This is the time for concerted, deliberate action. The founders gave us the template of what to do when the federal government should become obtuse, tone deaf, a law unto itself. Thankfully, back in 1787, they put into Article 5 the second way to propose amendments to the Constitution, and that is through the Convention of States. I believe that's the only real option available for us to make the corrections necessary to stave off what becomes a closer and closer and more imminent reality of fiscal collapse.
And we are speaking with North Carolina Representative Dennis Riddell. Representative Riddell, why did you not just support Convention of States, but you became a champion for our resolution? Why did you decide to do that in the North Carolina House of Representatives?
You know, it's funny. As I grew up and came into adulthood, and I was looking for a way to be impactful in my nation just as a citizen. I thought Congress was where things would happen. So I spent a lot of time concentrating on supporting good candidates for Congress and the Senate, obviously the presidency as well. And an opportunity came up unexpectedly several years ago to run for the State House in North Carolina. And I was successful in the 2012 election, and was put in place to represent District 64, mostly a good bit of Alamance County here in North Carolina. And it was that same year, in my first year in office in 2013 rather, that I came across the Convention of States at an ALEC conference. And it just stopped me cold, because I had been through I don't know how many election cycles working to elect good conservatives to public office at every level, but concentrating in Washington, D.C. really. Had a lot of successes, had some defeats. But I was concerned that no matter what we did, it seemed that the deficit spending continued, the public debt and the off-budget debt kept growing at alarming rates, and it seemed like there was nobody in D.C., except a few small, shouldn't say small, but a few voices, steady, calling for the kind of fiscal responsibility the Article 5 Convention of States does, but not enough to change the course. And what Article 5 struck me was, we don't have to try to change Washington. We can utilize the conservative voices extensively around the United States and various legislatures across the country to impose that discipline from outside of Washington, D.C. That's the bottom line for me. It was obvious years ago. It's even more so today. Washington will not discipline itself. Washington will do nothing to reduce its power. They are incapable of doing that. So this must come, this solution to this must come from outside of Washington, D.C. And the only alternative that provides for that is an Article 5 Convention of States to propose amendments.
Mm-hmm. Just a moment ago, you were talking about the current administration. If they got like half of what they want to get through Congress, the amount of debt would be crushed, and even more so than the crushing debt that we already currently have. So there seems to be, even though as an to be an urgency, a sense of urgency right now, working its way through the country to do something to prevent the federal government from this contending and spending that we are seeing. Do you feel that sense of urgency, and are you concerned about the trajectory that the United States is currently on?
Yes, very concerned. Some of the most compelling testimony in that Judiciary Reform Committee was by my colleague and strong COS supporter, Representative John Hardister. John serves as our majority whip in the House. And he went through some of the fiscal implications of the amount of debt we are accumulating per minute, per hour. He went to the US debt clock online and just started reading off some of the statistics. And that clearly made an impression upon members of the committee and the public that were there. I heard from several people afterwards, some staff members that said, I had no idea it was that bad, that our debt problem was that severe. And at that time, John was talking just about the $28 trillion public debt, the acknowledged debt that we have. And we did not even speak to the estimated $140 trillion of unfunded future liabilities that are out there waiting for us.
Yeah. When you start getting into the unfunded liabilities, it just becomes, you can't even grasp the amount of money that we are going to have to one day spend. How do you wrap your mind around that? So our resolution, it covers 3 topics: term limits, fiscal restraints, and federal overreach, and kind of putting limitations on the federal government's ability to overstep its bounds. In light of what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, is there an amendment that you like most that would fit into that category or into one of those 3 categories?
Well, there's several. Some have actually been proposed. Some of them have actually been proposed in the Congress, but obviously they have a half-life there under the current leadership and Democrat majority. I think probably the most important thing is to balance the budget. Because that will tell the world and the nation and those who we ask to absorb our public debt, purchase our bonds and our loan instruments, that we are serious about getting our house righted, getting things back on an even keel here in our country financially. The longer we go with accumulating debt, the more unrealistic it becomes to people and nations especially, that we would want to purchase our debt. The more they realize it's a higher risk. So they're going to demand a higher interest rate. With interest rates right now very low, we don't see the impact on the budget that much. But when interest rates start climbing, which they eventually will, the cost to borrow at the amounts that the federal government is accumulating as borrowed debt will be staggering, and it'll start pushing other things out of the room. I like to tell my Democrat colleagues, my friends on the other side, that you pick your favorite, whatever your favorite social program is, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, preschool education, whatever it is, that it is inevitable if we keep going at the rate we have been of spending and deficits, that interest on the debt alone will become $1 trillion before too long. And that kind of interest that you have to service will push other things off of the budget. It must.
So who is Dennis Riddell outside of being a representative for North Carolina? Because unlike Congress, state representatives, it's not a full-time gig. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what pushed you to want to run to be a representative in North Carolina.
Well, who am I? I am one of the most blessed men in America. I have a wonderful wife, Holly. We've been married coming up on 39 years. And we have 8 children. And that is my investment in the future, but it's also my concern for the future with them. Career-wise, I spent 35 years in the Merchant Marine. I was a marine engineer, ship's engineer. I worked down in the engine room of different merchant ships for 35 years. Also found time to teach school, high school social studies for 7 years, and retired out of the Merchant Marine in 2012, coincidentally, when this seat was becoming open, and concerned about whether my children this is the bottom line, Andrew, for me, and for my wife and I too. I was concerned that my children would not have the opportunities and the experiences that I have enjoyed throughout my life as an American citizen, that these things were in jeopardy because of the madcap spending and the shift to just total irresponsibility in many other areas of our daily life here in our country. It just can't continue. So I thought, well, this is my job for the next several years. I need to be involved in trying to preserve the future for the next generation. What we're doing to them is immoral. It is just wicked that we would saddle another generation with our debts, with the debts we've accumulated, and go on our merry way as if that's all right. That is just wrong, absolutely wrong.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's clear that you are a servant for the people of North Carolina, and you're a servant to many others too, inside your private and public life. That is absolutely amazing that you took some time out of your day to join us here to talk about the Convention of States resolution. Congratulations on the victory that you had. Our thoughts and prayers are with you moving forward through the House, and we hope to have you back when the House does pass our resolution. Thank you so much, Representative Riddell.
It's my pleasure, and thank you again to the grassroots and the people that work within the organization. You're the ones that make it happen. I might be the occasional public face, but I don't do this on my own. I do this because we have a boatload of wonderful patriots behind us working on this every single day. So thank you, and God bless you all.
God bless you as well.
Andrew, great show. So glad to be a part of this show and to be part of the trivia. And hopefully we're educating our incredible audience to be able to help you to understand how you can promote Convention of States. And if you recall, I've got this great shirt. This one's a sample, but this one right here, there we go, is called The True American. And that is our prize today for the person that answered our trivia question correctly. But you also notice I'm wearing a shirt, and it is the response to the executive order that President Biden has put out there to curtail our Second Amendment rights, which according to the Constitution says shall not be infringed. And if you want to get one of these, of course, you can go to shopconventionestates.com. But in the meantime, let's get to our trivia question. And the question was, there are interstate conventions that have happened in American history. Like I said earlier, some before our country or the Constitution was ratified, some after. And so I guess that kind of negates question or answer number A, which was, because the question was how many, and A was 1. So obviously I gave you a little bit of a hint. So you have a choice really between B, C, and D. B was under 10, C was 27, and D was 38. And the answer was D. There's been roughly 38. You don't know if there's going to be more discovered or not, because Rob Natelson, a constitutional scholar, has uncovered at least that many. Now, you might be thinking, what's the big deal about having 38 interstate conventions? And the reason is because they are run exactly like a convention of states. So if you're wondering about rules, if you're wondering about runaway, if you're wondering about how this could possibly happen and be function, there's so many in history that have been done for various reasons. And if you want to check that out, go to conventionofstates.com, look up Natelson in our search, because we have a search of our website. Look up the word N-A-T-E-L-S-O-N, N-A-T-E-L-S-O-N. Just search for Natelson, and you'll be able to find a great article on when he discovered the 37th convention. And it'll tell you all the reasons why this is important. So that's what we got going right now. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something about why a convention of states is perfectly safe and perfectly germane to the Constitution. And now back to you, Andrew, to wrap it up.
Thanks, Mike. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign off. I know the situation seems pretty desperate right now. It seems the federal government just keeps on steamrolling your rights, blowing out the budget, spending trillions upon trillions of your hard-earned tax dollars on frivolous things, just really saddling the next generation with crushing debt. And of course, career politicians are making decisions that should be made by you, that should be made closer to home. But don't worry, there is a solution to this problem, to the runaway debt, to the career politicians, all of this. The founders gave it to us. The founders gave us in Article 5 a remedy to cure a federal government that had run out of control. In Article 5, it allows for amendments if 2/3 of the states pass identical applications to call a convention of states. Here at Convention of States, we are attempting to do that because we want to give you back your self-governance. We believe these decisions should be made closer to home, not bureaucrats and career politicians thousands of miles away. So we have 15 states who have passed our COS resolution to limit the size, scope, and the jurisdiction of the federal government. We need to get to 34. Once we get to 34 states that passed our resolution, that will trigger a convention of states. And we will then propose amendments to rein in the federal government spending, to implement term limits for elected officials, and also to reduce the overreach that we have seen coming out of the federal government. But we can't do it alone. We need you to be in this fight. So there's two things I want you to do. First, go sign the Convention of States petition if you have not already done so, and then make sure you sign that petition. After signing the petition and sharing the petition, make sure that you then join a local team. This is the way that you get involved. Go to the Take Action page and get involved with a local team. Become a leader within your community. Now, we want to give a special shout out because we have the COS store, which is back up and running. There are amazing t-shirts out there, especially the Hell No Joe t-shirt, which says, hell no, Joe, you're not going to come take our AR-15. Make sure to go pre-order your t-shirts at the Convention of States store right now. There are other t-shirts there like the Defiant t-shirt. There's the COS G.I. Joe t-shirt. There are plenty of t-shirts there. So make sure to go check that out. Also, make sure that you are following us on social media. Go to Parler, Instagram, Facebook. You're already following us on Facebook, but make sure to go to the YouTube page. Make sure you follow us on MeWe, Gab, wherever you're getting your social media buzz. Make sure that you are also following Convention of States. Like the content, share the content, and then also, why don't you go check out the Battle Cry with co-founder and president Mark Meckler. It's on at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at the Facebook page. The Battle Cry with Mark Meckler, it's excellent. You'll get your dose of Mark Meckler. You'll hear about the things that are going around across the nation, the hot topics, and you'll also hear about Convention of States as well. Make sure you also tune in next Tuesday for another edition of COS Live, same time, same place, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, if you are looking for the person who is going to restore the Republic, look in the mirror because it's going to be you. Well, that's all we have time for today. We'll see you next week. Bye.